All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christina, and I'm the Adult Program Coordinator at the Bloomingdale Public Library. We have a special event and a special presenter with us tonight. But before I introduce her, I just wanted to go over some of our upcoming virtual programs that we have going on at the Bloomingdale Public Library. So next week on Monday, we have art historian Jeff Misher with us. He's going to be talking about the Detroit Institute of Art. And what he's going to do is go over some of those fantastic masterpieces that they own in their world-class collection. So if you want to know more about the Detroit Institute of Art, he will be talking about that on Monday, February 7th at 6:30. And then on Tuesday, February 22nd, we're going to have local author William Hazelgrove back with us. He's got a new narrative nonfiction book out, and it's called The Plot to Kidnap George Washington. So he's going to be here Tuesday, February 22nd at 6:30 on Zoom to talk about his new book, all about the plot to kidnap George Washington. And then finally, on Monday, February 28th, we're going to have historian Jim Gibbons with us. He is going to talk about the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. So again, that is Monday, February 28th at 6:30, 1918 Spanish flu pandemic with historian Jim Gibbons. Now, all of these virtual programs you can sign up for on the library's website. You would go to our calendar and search for adult programs. We have adult programs planned through the summer, so you can definitely start registering for these things now. You can also give us a call at the reference desk, and we'll help you sign up for any and all programs that you're interested in. And you can even come into the library and visit us. The library is open. All right, and now let's introduce tonight's presenter. College of DuPage Fashion Studies instructor Shannon Johnson has a broad scope of learning and achievement. Her background is in art, fashion, and history. Shannon merges her knowledge of fashion with African American studies. As a doctoral graduate, Shannon amplifies the relation between historical fashion with contemporary trends that creates an influential impact on the world. Welcome, Shannon.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you guys could join me as we walk through just a small portion of African fashion. It's a huge industry and the textiles as well, but we will talk about a few things and talk about and move through how some of these fashions transpire over into current and modern fashion. So welcome to the presentation. All right. African fashion reveals ancient stories. Stories never told in history courses or recorded in history books. African fashion has been a part of global fashion for decades. However, it is not always represented properly. Africa is not always recognized, but some of the world's greatest empires originated there. It has a remarkable history that coincides with a brilliant and bold textile. In 1885, colonization in Africa began. It was also known as the Partition of Africa. Because the textile industry in Africa was so extraordinarily rich and full of raw materials, African lands, along with the mines that developed it, was extremely coveted. On the map, you can see that the areas in yellow and pink represent cotton, textiles, gold, and diamonds as a large part of fashion and accessories in Africa. Africa is a complex social and historical entity where fashion is just as deep and colorful as the continent itself. Fashion is and always has been recognized as a global language, becoming a medium by which Africa's diversity is chosen to speak to the world. This amazing history of clothing and textiles is thought to stretch back over 75,000 years. Although there is a long history, the evolution of African clothing is difficult to pinpoint because of lack of historical evidence. As well, tracing the development of African styles can be problematic due to the deficiencies in what was recorded. Most of these deficiencies can be contributed to slavery, where within the global language, Africans lost their voice. It is important to understand why African styles are in the spotlight and what African designers do to capitalize on this moment. If you explore ancient art, you will find proof that Africans did indeed create various clothing styles and methods of weaving in addition to processing raw materials for beautiful colors that we find today. As we walk through the history of clothing of our ancestors and from the motherland, we will find each and every textile expresses individuality and is completely unique. While several iconic trends, both past and present, stem from African American culture, the Black community remains underrepresented and often uncredited for their valuable contribution to the fashion industry. Black culture has joined the global conversation by showcasing brands in support of the movement for equality despite the current situation in the United States. We honor and celebrate some of the defining trends influenced by African Americans. From 800 CE to the 11th century, the Ghanaian Empire flourished due to the development of extensive trade routes in North Africa and the discovery of gold throughout the region. As a result, many smaller groups developed communities within Southern Africa, causing the power of the Ghanaians to decrease. By the end of the 11th century, and with the fall of the Ghanaians, West Africa became a profound influence in African culture, leading to the rise in the Malian Empire. Malians wore a hand-printed cloth called bogolan fani, or what we call mudcloth. Each cloth was arranged in symbols and held secret meanings. To break down the word, bogo meaning earth or mud, len meaning with, and fini meaning cloth. If you put that all together, you have earth with cloth or cloth from the earth. The language of the cloth was passed down from mother to daughter, but it was the men's responsibility to weave narrow strips of plain fabric that were pieced together into large rectangular cloth. Mudcloth is a handmade Malian cotton fabric, traditionally dyed from fermented mud. Mudcloth is exported worldwide for use in fashion, fine arts, and decoration. This tradition dates back to the 12th century and is a symbol of Malian cultural identity. Mudcloth in Western Africa is known as Ankara, and in Eastern Africa is known as Kente, both manufactured to carry meaning to the weavers and to the onlookers. As the patterns were complex, so were their meanings. After the construction of the cloth by the men, the fabric was then dyed in a bath of leaves and branches. This process is used to bind dye to the fabric. Then the fabric was laid in the sun to dry, after which beautiful patterns are carefully painted using mud. When the mud dries, the unpainted areas are treated with the bleaching agent, turning them to a natural yellow color or brown color. Mudcloth is still produced in large quantities, mostly for tourist trades and with men being responsible for most of the production. Today, mudcloth is used in a variety of home fashion, furniture, and home decor. It is a very popular way to add texture and pattern to one's outfit or to a room. Designer Chris Sado pioneered promoting African fashion on the international stage. Sado's designs featured a great deal of mudcloth. His clothing drew from his roots in Mali and is recognized by many fashion magazines as well as by world-renowned designers. Although the neighboring country of West Africa, Ghana, had a loss of power due to smaller established countries and the development of the trade routes in the north, they still remain relevant to African fashion. Originating in Ghana is the Kente cloth, Africa's most popular and beloved piece of cloth. Kente cloth has beautiful hand-woven patterns and colors, which represented specific gender, status, and regions of Africa. Kente cloth also dates back to the 12th century. It was worn by the Ashanti people of Ghana. The cloth was worn by kings, queens, and important figures of the states. Each Ashanti king would create a new Kente design. There were 17 different rulers since the 16th century. Kente comes from the Akan word Kenten, which means basket. It is also known as Wintoma, which means woven cloth. The Akan people of Ghana have been weaving Kente for centuries. The garment is very important to the Ghanaian culture, as the first Kente appeared about 400 years ago. Today, Kente is made of cotton to fit Africa's climate. Kente has more than 300 patterns. Kente cloth is a fabric that is so bright and cheerful. Many of the locals wear traditional garments to church or to events as a way to celebrate their culture and commemorate the beauty of the motherland. But why is it not good to wear African Kente? Africans believe it is misrepresented when it becomes a fashion statement. They believe that the meanings are lost in pop culture. Kente is a unisex design. Traditionally, men wore Kente by wrapping it around the body and over one shoulder, similar to a toga. Women wrap the cloth around their body, under their arm, like a shawl or a skirt. Often, Kente is worn with a plain colored blouse to complete the outfit. Originally, Kente was made with silk interwoven in the cloth, but today, Kente is made of silk, cotton, and rayon. Kente cloth is a familial tradition passed down from one generation to another. It is always created by the males, from adults to learning children. Some of the symbols of Kente are recognized as the square, representing earth, femininity, fertility, and life. The triangle, representing life, birth, existence, and death. The diamond, worn by royalty to show dual roles as a man and a king. The circle, representing eternity, infinity, royal power, and lineage. The cross, symbolizing spirit and breath of life. The zigzag, meaning life doesn't follow a straight path. And the golden stool, a symbol of power. There are many others, but these are some of the main ones. Same thing with the colors. There are many colors that represent and have meanings with Kente. Some of those, I'm not going to go through all, but red symbolizes blood and spiritual feelings. Pink represents calmness and tenderness. Yellow represents the yolk of an egg, sometimes fruits and vegetables, and is represented as holy and precious. Gold represents wealth and royalty. And white represents the whites of an egg, healing and purity. Maroon represents earth, mother, healing, and protection from evil. Purple represents earth and healing. Blue symbolizes the sky, harmony, peace, and good fortune. Green represents plants, growth, and good health. Silver symbolizing the moon, purity, and serenity. Gray representing ashes and spiritual cleansing, and black representing aging, strong spiritual energy, and the spirits of our ancestors. Today, Kente cloth is used in popular fashion and styles. In 1958, Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister of independent Ghana, wore the cloth to meet President Eisenhower at the White House. It was also worn as a symbol of power during the Civil Rights Movement. In the early 1970s, it was worn on dashikis and became popular in the fashion industry. The 2017 graduating ceremony at Florida A&M University wore Kente on their cloth stoles. Kente cloth and dashikis remain staples of the urban Black life and received a new layer of significance when adopted by the hip hop community in the 1980s. Next, we will take a look at the complicated history of West African wax prints. African wax prints are known as Ankara or Dutch wax prints, very common to Western Africa. These are industrially produced colorful cotton cloths with the batik-inspired painting. There is a difference in the intensity of the color when you look at the front and the back of the fabric. The influence of batik technique comes from Indonesia. The process happens using wax in a pattern on the top of the cloth and dyeing the cloth with the wax on to resist the color. Then the wax is removed. Wax prints are considered a form of nonverbal communication for African women. Some wax prints are named after buildings, sayings, personalities, cities, and occasions. Wax prints have a high market value, making them more popular for African women. In talking about wax prints, we have to look at colonization. The Dutch employed 3,000 soldiers from West Africa between 1831 and 1872 to help with expansion and to fight against the Indonesian ruler, Sumatra. Legend has it that the soldiers returned to the Gold Coast, or what we consider modern-day Ghana, and carrying rolls of Dutch manufactured batik. In the 1880s, there was a strong reception of wax prints because of their trading power at the Dutch and Scottish ports. Success of the trade prompted other manufacturers to enter the market, causing Dutch wax prints to be quickly integrated into African apparel. They are sometimes referred to as veritable Dutch hollandaise and wax hollandaise. Here comes the controversy. Is it African or is it Dutch? According to a myth revived by the British Museum, it was African veterans from the Dutch colonial army that introduced wax print textiles to the West Africa. The problem is, in 1596 to 1829, over the course of 200 years or more, the Netherlands was involved in African Middle Passage slave trade and the use of African slaves in the colonies. Historians estimate more than 500,000 people worked as slaves in the Dutch colonies. So it's likely that Africans worked in these factories producing those wax prints. Other evidence that wax prints originated in Africa are patterns had Ghanaian names, proving West African heritage. One print was named Efi Ebosia, which means gravel, said to resemble small stones people kept outside their homes. Researcher Elans introduced the argument that the design Staff of Kingship, the pattern portrayed a sword worn by the Ashanti king before he was removed. It was removed from the Ashanti by the British in 1900. Elans reports when the sword was stolen, Ghana commissioned ABC Wax Company in England to create the design. 125 years later, the design in wax prints was on the runway in October 2019 at Accra Fashion Week in Ghana. It was introduced in a beachwear collection of designer Adipose. Sold on Amazon in a book form by Aduku Parker, it features full-size patterns for making garments with wax prints. It also provides 25 vibrant projects and is sold for $17.99. Ghanaian designer Nana Kwame Adusi was the founder of the AFUA Fashion Week, started in 2011. The designs featured many wax prints. AFUA stands for African Fashion Unity Association. As we explore a bit of North Africa, you will see similarities in Egyptian and Moroccan fashion. Since the 1500s, citizens of Egypt and Morocco have covered their bodies thoroughly. Some of these ideas were inherited from the Turks, Europeans, and Muslim countries, but many kept with their traditional dress. Along with tradition of dress in Egypt is the popularity of wearing jewelry and makeup. People of ancient Egypt wore jewelry to show their wealth. They believed that in doing so, they were more favored by the gods. Wearing as many pieces as they could included bracelets, earrings, necklaces, buttons, pendants, and neck collars. The rich mostly wore jewelry that was made of gold or precious stones. Other societies wore jewelry crafted from colored pottery and beads. If you think back to the diagram that I showed in the beginning of colonization, if you remember, the map was covered with African lands full of diamonds and gold. Makeup was worn by both men and women in ancient Egypt. They used black coal eyeliner to fill the eyes and to darken the eyebrows. They also colored their eyelids with blue and green eyeshadow made from powder minerals. Henna also dyes and add color to the nails. Men's traditional costume of Egypt consisted of a long skirt called the galibaya with optional trousers. Galibaya had long, narrow sleeves and a triangular neckline. Other outer garments for men included headdresses and shoes. Egyptian women, as well as men, wore multiple layers of light, loose clothing. It is connected with Muslim religion. They would often cover their heads thoroughly and their bodies. The females also wore long galibaya robes. They accompanied baggy trousers used as underwear, several layers of outerwear, and headdresses and shoes. Most women wore mandavel, which is a beautiful and delicate headwear that covered part of a female face. It was made from a long rectangle. Another light, loose garment worn by Egyptian women for outdoor activities is the tab sibla. Egyptian women traditionally used an overcoat called a jablet or benish. This is a wide overcoat with long sleeves. It is similar to the male piece, but it has a more delicate and feminine design. It is the female variation of a kaftan. A tunic from the 8th century was found. It was preserved and exhibited at the V&A or Victoria and Albert Museum. On the tunic is a beautifully applied tapestry decoration that was stitched on separately from the actual garment weaving. This is a close-up of the design, and you can see the separate tapestry that has been applied. Today, there are many ideas that come from ancient Egypt. Egyptian scarf weaving is one example. This is an ancient craft as well as a stream of money for hundreds of years. Large quantities of Egyptian-inspired jewelry can be seen today. The Nefertiti design is one of the most popular designs found on necklaces, earrings, bracelets, rings, and collars. The modern tunic is very similar to ancient tunics as well. The tunic is a large part of the African American community, from traditional, religious, activist, and street style clothing. As said in the beginning, Moroccan dress was similar to that of Egypt. These styles have not changed much despite the influence of European culture. The most worn garment is the jelba. And the jelba is a long folk dress with a hood, usually made with raw materials. In the summer, it was made out of linen, cotton, or silk. In the winter, it was made of wool or silk, or a silk and wool blend. Another traditional garment of Morocco is the kaftan. The kaftan was worn by men and women. It is a type of jalaba with a hood. It is created for more fancy for weddings and for ceremonies. Over the decades, you can see the jalaba and the kaftan have not changed much. During the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the jalaba incorporated more jewelry and decoration in their designs. After the 60s, the design seemed to relax and become more casual unless there was a wedding or a ceremony. Another variant of the robe was the gandora, also worn by men and women. Gandoras had short sleeves and no hood. They could be plain or have simple embellishments on the front. Headdresses for men were quite popular. They were called a tarbouche. A tarbouche is a tight-fitting box skull cap made from felt with a tassel. Moroccan shoes were usually a leather slipper without heels called balga. They were more favored by the men. Women also wore balgas, but they also wore heels with embellishments. Sandals were worn by both men and women. Massive jewelry was popular in Morocco. They often had complicated patterns and large precious stones adorned with gold and silver thread decoration. Jewelry was also part of festive headdress for special occasions. Some of the different types of Moroccan jewelry include Moroccan beaded necklaces that had many rows and variations of beading. The Kamsa jewels, also known as the Eye of Fatima or the Hand of Fatima. This represented the eye that sees everything and protects from evil encounters. The Eye of Fatima was found in pendants, necklaces, and earrings. Moroccan silver was used widely in bracelets. It was richly embellished and it was usually fairly large. Head adornments embellished with eye-catching jewelry sets that had dangles and sparkles was very popular. And then the Berber necklaces, massive necklaces usually made of silver, large coral, or amber. Berber necklaces were very expensive and they still are pretty expensive today. Today, we see a great deal of modern Berber jewelry and Moroccan silver cuff bracelets. The link below provides a beautiful presentation about Berber jewelry. I will provide the link later after the presentation if anyone is interested in watching. Today, modern streetwear presents the idea of combining jalabas and Converse sneakers and jalabas and modern sandals. As well, you see head wraps that are a little more relaxed and large, heavy jewelry that are more modernized. These ideas take a traditional look and make it more casual and more relaxed. The traditions of South Africa were not included in this presentation because they are more tribal in nature and does not transfer much into modern clothing. Zulu clothing is inspirational and decorative, but it doesn't have a large market for production and profit potential. In conclusion, African Americans seek out past traditions of clothing and textiles. For a long time, all of African fashion was misrepresented as tribal or exotic, as well as simplified to animal skins and mudcloths. Colonization enforced massive change in the daily wear of African cities. Even after independence, traditional garments were not encouraged, and consequently, traditional African dress was replaced by Western dress codes. From texture to color and style, African Americans have struggled to discover dress and clothing that once had meaning and stood to define their ancestors. The idea from this deep, rich continent are being rediscovered and becoming staples in the wardrobe of African Americans. They have also become an inspiration to other cultures. I only say, wear them with pride, but seek to understand the deep meanings and culture that these ideas originated from. Thank you. Questions to ponder, questions to ponder. We don't have to answer, but do you think that colonization, if it never happened, that the idea of clothing and textiles would be so popular among African Americans today. Also, do you think that Black people moved away from traditional African dress because society adopted more casual styles? And have you ever worn African inspired clothing? And if so, did you look for the meaning before wearing it, or was it worn for a fashion trend? Those are just things to think about. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon. That was very informative. And we do have people chiming in to say that, yes, they would love to see links in books if you have any recommendations.
Okay, I can provide those for you. Would you like me to send those in a document for you and you can just send them out, or I could provide? Okay. Yeah, so I can do that. So if anybody is interested, then I will provide that information and send that over.
Okay, that sounds great. So if anyone out there has any questions that they're still typing in, I'll give you some time. But first I wanted to ask Shannon a question. You had talked about how the manufacturing of textiles was mostly done by men. Is that still true today?
In some parts. With Kente cloth, yes, it's mostly males that do so. A lot of the others, if it's hand weaving, some of the women do participate in that, but a lot of it is still done and produced in factories and things like that by the males. And it's a traditional thing more than a matter of having manpower. It's just something that's passed down from generation to generation, from males to their sons or other family members.
So do those items then stay within the family? So if you're being taught a skill and you produce something, does that stay within the family? Or do they
unless if that tradition is something where they're producing items that are being sold at a market, then I would say no. And that's kind of how, I guess, ideas spill over into the United States and to other countries because we are selling them, and you get those ideas and they process them that way. We also see Africans wearing, traditional Africans wearing traditional clothing, and we get inspired and I have ideas about fashion from that. And a lot of fashion is made just by inspiration, if you really think about it.
All right, and we have a question. Miriam has her question. Thank you so much for this informative presentation. So she has a clarification question. Is it accurate to say that traditional African clothing was mostly woven and then the wax print style clothes arose post-colonization?
Absolutely. Mostly was all hand technique before wax prints. Wax print was after colonization began, and when they started to mass produce things. Before that, they would hand do these things and dry them in the mud and hand paint on many of the garments to get these beautiful designs. Wax prints are mostly a manufactured process. Absolutely.
All right. So yeah, we still have some people chiming in to say thank you very much, very informative. All right. So if there are no other questions out there, we've got more people saying thank you very much. So interesting.
Thank you guys for listening.
Methods. Yes.
I appreciate you guys coming and sharing the presentation with me. There's lots more about African fashion and textiles that can't just be put into one presentation, but I tried to cover the areas that had the most impact on the fashion industry and what we kind of carry over the ideas. I think I said in the presentation, I didn't talk about South African fashion because a lot of it is very tribal. Maybe some of the jewelry might transpire, the colors and things like that, but a lot of it is not mass produced in the US, or the trends don't kind of transpire from there to here. But mostly the most important pieces are coming from Western Africa and North Africa, and a bit of the East.
All right, great. So we have another question that just came in. As you were discussing the historical context, was clothing regarded as merely purposeful, or was there a sense of excitement about textiles, jewelry, as is the case in our contemporary times?
well, ancient times to probably up to the 1900s, fashion and textiles was basically meant for, it was about representing status. It was representing locations, letting people know where they were from. African clothing had meaning, colors had meanings, and you wore them for those meanings. And it wasn't just for trend and excitement based on things that you see that are out there and that are popular. It may have become more like that as we move through colonization, but before that, I mean, I would say they were probably inspired by the bold textiles, the bold colors that they could create, but a lot of it was meaning based and had a reason for.
Okay. Well, that's great. So we have another question about museums that display African fashion. Is
Okay.
there some place where people can go locally, like the Dusabu or Field?
There are a couple clothing museums around here, but they don't specifically target African fashion. They may have some entities of African fashion. I do know that there's what's the one in the Chicago History Museum does have a feature in African fashion. There's other museums, some out in DuPage County. They have very small presentations of African clothing, but locally not as much as if you go to Washington, D.C., or you go to the Victoria and Albert Museum, things like that. Those are things that you would want to go and do a full trip on or something like that, where you really would get inspired by what you see and but around here, not a lot. Unfortunately, but they do try a little bit. A lot of the museums do have features on some clothing. So just clothing in general, though, is very hard. A lot of the museums don't carry clothing and don't feature clothing in their exhibits. So
Yeah, that's so true.
yeah.
We just had a person chime in, Maria says, and this ties into one of our programs coming up. If you're in Detroit, there is an exhibit that contains African fashion at the Detroit Institute of Art. Very cool.
Yeah, so again, in other cities, you are probably more gonna target African fashion more than locally. I think Chicago is just kind of very diverse, and things are kind of spread out all over the place, and they really don't have a big market for fashion yet. They tried a few years ago to create Fashion Week to become really popular here in Chicago. I mean, they still do it, but it's not like you would see it in New York and Milan and places like that. So they are trying to do that, and they're trying to get upcoming designers, and but it's just hasn't caught on the way that we would like it to have caught on. Yeah.
All right. Well, for the final closing remarks, Shannon, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do at COD and what classes you're teaching?
Absolutely. Well, I teach pretty much everything. I have a pretty broad spectrum in the fashion studies department, but I also teach graphic design. I teach Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. I incorporate that in all my classes. I teach a visual merchandising class where we actually create store windows. If you ever come down to the department, come and look. I am teaching that class this semester. We just started, so there's nothing there yet. But if you wait to mid-semester, come down and check out some of the displays. I'm teaching a clothing construction class this semester. And a lot of my classes are fashion styling, and I teach fashion history. So that's what
okay. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, and we have someone who says, wow, I'm definitely going to look into your classes as a college educated student.
And so I just want to let you know, I don't know if it's going to run. I created a new class called From Africa to African Americans. So if you're interested, that class will be running a 12-week starting February 21st. So if you're interested in that class, please join.
Yeah, great timing.
Yes, awesome.
Yes.
Wonderful, guys. Well, I really appreciate everyone coming out.
Yes, me as well. Thank you so much. This was really informative, and we'd love to have you back again sometime, Shannon.
Awesome. I will do.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.